This is the 9th edition of the Tiny Lab Talks. The main question today is promoting choral singing. Tiny Lab Talks are brief, informal talks between researchers invited by the University of Aveiro and researchers from the University of Aveiro itself through the American Corner program on topics such as technologies, innovation, research and culture. The conversations generally take place here at the University of Aveiro's American Corner MediaLab with the support of the US Embassy in Lisbon. So for today, I'd like to give a very warm welcome to both of our guests, Dr. Patrick Freer and Dr. Antonio Vassalo-Lourenço. So Dr. Freer is Associate Professor of Choral Music Education at Georgia State University, Atlanta. He holds degrees from Westminster Choir College and from the Teachers College of Columbia University. Patrick is very much in demand internationally as a conductor and has conducted and/or presented in 39 of the US states and in 28 different countries, including a recent guest conducting slot with the Bogota Philharmonic Orchestra in Colombia. Now, Dr. Freer is the editor of the International Journal of Research in Choral Singing, past editor of the Music Educators Journal, has authored 3 textbooks, a DVD series for teachers, the internet series for middle school singers, and on top of that about 120 articles in a number of national and international specialist journals. Dr. Antonio Vassalo-Lourenço holds a PhD in orchestral conducting from the University of Cincinnati, where he was also an assistant professor. Nowadays, he teaches choir, ensemble and conducting classes at the Department of Communication and Art here at the University of Aveiro. Since 1999, he is the principal conductor and artistic director of the Orquestra da Filarmonia dos Beiras. He has a wide range of conducting experience, both orchestral and choral, from the Concert Orchestra of Cincinnati to the Choir Regina Coeli in Lisbon, which he conducted from 1983 until 2008. He also frequently works with local amateur choirs in collaborations with the orchestra. Dr. Lourenço is extremely active in the world of opera as well and founded the Estúdio de Ópera do Centro in 2006, which is a very important platform for Portuguese opera and opera for children. His research focuses on the recuperation and dissemination of Portuguese musical patrimony. And I'm Aoife Heine. I'm originally from Ireland. I did my master's in choral conducting and then a PhD in music here at the University of Aveiro, both under the academic supervision of Dr. Antonio Vassalo-Lourenço, and I'm currently a postdoctorate researcher here at ENET-MD at the University of Aveiro. I also teach choir, vocal ensemble and choral conducting at the Escola Superior de Música in Porto, and I work with various choirs here in Aveiro. And my research interests focus mostly on non-professional choral singing and music education. So, let's begin. To start with the topic of this talk, a question for Patrick. Can you tell us a little bit about your work in relation to promoting choral singing and particularly your research involving the changing voice in adolescence?
Sure. I'm interested in promoting choral singing because I was one of those boys who was told not to sing when my voice started to change. So I was actually told to stand in the back row of the choir and mouth the words. So I stopped. And my experience is not so dissimilar to many boys who stop singing because for one reason or another, they find themselves feeling that singing is not something that they can do. They're not skilled at it, so they do something else. This often happens during adolescence, during the voice change, at which time the body is changing in such a way that it makes the boy good at other things, usually things that involve his muscles, his body, that are growing in a way to support his capacities that involve things involving coordination or strength, maybe often sports. So what we often find is that boys say they're interested in those sorts of things but not singing. So my interest is in promoting the capacity of boys to see themselves as singers so that they can engage in singing at whatever point they wish, whether it be a continuation from their childhood singing or something they step away from for a time and then come back to as an adult. So I've been really interested in this phenomenon, and by the way I became interested or involved in choral music education is that I found a professor when I was a young college student who, well, I got lost actually, finding my way to the right classroom, and I happened upon the music classroom, and a conversation ensued where I was asked why was I not majoring in music if I wanted to be involved in music. And the answer was because I can't sing. This conductor said, well, let's find out. And one thing led to another, and he helped me discover the things I could do rather than focusing on the things that I couldn't. And so I've traveled around the world asking boys about their experiences and started to gather some themes about why boys sing, why they don't, and what they want from choral music experiences that would help them see themselves as musicians and singers through the entirety of their lives, in whatever way it takes shape.
Great. It's really, really interesting. And in terms of the data that you've produced through all this travel and through all these conversations, what would you say are the main themes that arise from this? Is there any one thing in particular that jumps out?
Yes. A couple of things combined. First of all, boys do like to sing. That's we often have a myth that they don't. They do. The problem is choral music in schools, sometimes how we run singing experiences. And so what they say about that they want about singing is they want to learn how to be good at it. They want to learn the skills. So the boys do want to learn technique. They do want to know what's happening to their voice during the voice change so that they can use those skills. And very often in choral music, with adolescents, we teach the right notes and the right rhythms, but not how to use the voice. And that seems to be a problem. So if there's an overwhelming theme that comes back in many different ways, it's that we fail as choral conductors and teachers because we focus on the wrong things with the boys. Mm-hmm. And that it's not that boys withdraw from singing because they don't like singing or don't like music. That's not true. What they don't like is how we teach it. Uh-huh. So that's what my focus is.
That's really interesting. Based on that, I know you are involved with the choir, conduct the choir of the music students, the music department, mm-hmm. which traditionally has a number of singing students and then students of non-orchestral instruments. Mm-hmm. How is your experience of the people coming from middle school or high school mm-hmm. in this case and entering in a university setting and their singing experience?
That proves exactly what you already said. Although they come to school at the age of 18 mostly, 17, so they already changed their voice. What I always feel in the same year at those young adults, basically they don't feel very comfortable at the beginning to sing in choir. They are not kids anymore, they already changed their voice, but they don't know yet how to sing. So part of my job is, in the beginning, is try to teach them and try to get their voice, their adult voice already, especially because we do very exigent programs like Verdi Requiem, or this year we are doing Beethoven 9th Symphony. So the students here, they do choir for 4 years. I mean, if 3 years of bachelor, and then if they go to the masters, they have one year more. And what happens every year is at the beginning, this group of young students, the first year students, they don't really know yet how to sing. So every year we need to rebuild the vocal aspects of the choir. Of course, it's not possible to do an individual teaching because this is a choir. This is not voice lessons, but we need to work with them. And I know every year that at the beginning they are not really able yet to sing, but after 1 year they start really singing. And what I feel is, on the 3rd or 4th year they are really singing. We feel that they will learn and they develop their voice in a level that was not when they arrived. And that really happens especially with the boys, not with the girls, which is natural. but is every year we need to do this process because they are just arriving in the point that they changed the voice recently, and they don't feel very comfortable yet with that. Apart from the fact now things are changing in our schools, in our conservatories, academies, they really now they all have choir mostly, but 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that was not like that. Most of the time they arrive here without, some never had the chance to sing if they were instrument players. But that is really changing. I feel every year the students become more, with more experience in doing music, not only their instrument. And that is very interesting. Although in questions of vocal aspects, they are not, especially the boys, they don't feel very comfortable at the beginning, but their evolution is very big. In 1 year we already feel the difference. And for us as choral teachers in an academy, we know every year we need to restart something. Basically 25% of the choir leaves every year, we have 25% of new people, so we always need to be rebuilding these aspects, but it's a very good challenge.
Great. And I was thinking actually, as in terms of giving more context to Patrick about the Portuguese context in particular, and choral singing as an activity here in Aveiro in particular. Choral singing is very, very strong. There's a widespread participation.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me tell you, although my PG is in orchestral conducting, and maybe today I'm more basically people knows me more as an orchestral conducting. My background is in choral and in voice. First of all, my bachelor is in voice, and I start singing at age 8 in a children's choir in Fundação do Banking, which was an excellent choir at the time, and we had a chance to perform with the orchestra with the Gulbenkian choir, which are professional organisms, and we had the chance to do repertoire from Bach to contemporary to Xenaxi, for example. So that was a terrific experience that I had from 8 to maybe 12 years. So my background is really choir. That's what I did until I was 30 years old, was mainly singing choir and then conducting choir. That's where I started. So I can say that at the end of the 80s, I'm from Lisbon. I used to live there and work there. I actually became the president of the Lisbon Association for Amateur Choirs. So I knew very well the context. I knew very well how many choirs, what they were doing, what were their level, and I can say today that it was a huge improvement in the quality of choirs, mostly because the conductors also improved a lot. When I started, there was no way to study conducting in Portugal, which today happens in every superior school of music. And it was not really a profession. There were 2 or 3 conductors that lived exclusively from conducting, amateurs. I'm not talking about the professional groups, I'm talking about amateurs. So things really changed on that way, and even at that period there were some young choirs, but mostly were old organizations with not so young people singing. And today I find not only in Lisbon but here in Aveiro there was really a movement that brought a lot of younger people to the choral movement. That is very important, and I'm here in Aveiro for more than 20 years. And I really, since the beginning, I used to work with local choirs, amateur choirs, and most really improved a lot. And actually, there are new groups. Eva is responsible for that too already, although she's here in Aveiro for how long? 7 years, maybe? 9 already. Wow.
Already.
Time runs.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she's working also a lot and help a lot to this movement to grow up. And my experience of working with amateurs, I did that for all my life, even or also within a professional with professional orchestras. I mean, in a professional context, we do concerts with a professional orchestra, but we do a lot with amateur choirs, not only in Aveiro and in the region, and that is very important, not just for them, but also for this the cultural movement and for the public, for the audience. And there are very good experience, and I hope that also helped to improve and bring more people to singing, and especially younger people, because we need to renew all these groups.
Which feeds very well back into Patrick's research and your experience. So we've seen that one thing that really motivates boys is not just the what of choral singing, not just the notes and rhythms and text, but the how and how to be good at it. So are there any other major themes that can either be huge deterrents to continuing choral singing, or on the opposite, that motivate and encourage?
Taking maybe a slightly different tact here, I'm really interested in boys singing in all kinds of experiences, of which the formal singing in a choral setting might be just one of them. Sure. Because we have many boys out there, but not all would want to sing in a choir, but some would. And so it's developing to me, what's most important is developing the singing skills so that a boy can sing in whatever situation he wants, wherever he wants, whenever he wants. And some of that will be with a Verdi Requiem and pieces like that. But others will sing in other ways. Mm-hmm. And so what's most important to me is helping boys. I think our mission should be to help boys and girls as well develop the capacity to see themselves as potential singers at all stages of their lives, so they can come back into it or out of it as they wish. One of the myths or problems that I think we have is that we consider it an issue that is not a good issue when a boy or a girl withdraws from singing. And I'm wondering if that is actually a big problem. Or is the bigger problem that they feel then they can't come back later? We very rarely stay with the same thing in our lives from beginning to end. I bet there were lots of activities you did as a young girl that you don't do now. There were lots I did as a young boy that I don't do now. But I don't feel like I stopped because I was bad at it or I couldn't do it. And so that's the issue, I think, is that when a boy withdraws from singing because he wants to do something else or whatever the situation is, or because the schedule is problematic, that how we handle that moment, how we handle that conversation leaves the door open for him to walk through again 10 years later, or slams it shut for him and his sons and everyone else that he will eventually influence. That's what I'm concerned about. So we know a couple of other things about what boys say. One is that they will withdraw if their friends withdraw. On the other hand, they will join and stay in a setting if their friends are there. It's the same in sports. It's the same in mathematics. It's the same everywhere. Boys are social and they do things together. They rarely do things by themselves. We know that boys need to have role models. So that's where these singers that you're working with and building up are so important. It's not so important that the boys want to be exactly like that role model, but they want to see that, singing in whatever situation is something men do, and I can do this. That's pretty important. And so another important thing is that the relationship between you and the boy is critical, even if he never says it. He needs to know that you support him as a singer, as a basketball player, as a scientist, as a whatever. That there's that positive relationship between the two of you that is really important, because they see singing in this group situation as being about a relationship with their friends, with you. And then the final thing I will say is that one deterrent to singing in a choir is to have all the kids sit in the same formation in rows where they can't speak, and the conductor tells them to do everything. Well, none of us likes to learn like that, even now, I'm sorry. And it's one reason why adolescent kids dislike church or settings like that, not because of maybe so much what's happening, but how they're forced to receive the information. In rows, silent, passive, while someone tells me what is and what's to be done. That's exactly how we run many of our choir rehearsals, and that's an issue.
Something on
Well,
that.
I'd like to add something to this discussion, because I mentioned the Verdi Requiem at the point because it was an example of a certain kind of vocal exigence, and we need to really have men's voices in the case of the boys. And I was dealing with the thing they just came, and they were not able to really sing Verdi at that time, and have this idea that we need to build this. But that's what was the example that I found at the moment to explain that. But of course, and going to in the same direction that what you're saying now, of course, what we do in the choir must be more than just Verdi or these formal things. For example, the year before the Verdi, we were singing a Queen's program with orchestra, which they loved, and they felt more comfortable at the beginning in singing. Although the vocal specs were similar, they were not really ready, but they felt a little more comfortable. What was easier to having singing and growing vocally. Anyway, they really don't need to have the same vocal quality and exigence for the Verdi, but it's always a way also to have them involved with the choral music and the idea of singing, because they really like to sing, to sing that, as they like to sing Verdi after that. I mean, it's the same thing. But of course we need to have this approach in doing not just the formal things, and do sometimes different things that are more connected with their experience as young people. And it's also an interesting aspect that we try to keep them involved, and for different reasons, in different ways. And for those that are not, at least at the beginning, very interesting in singing, because the choir is a course that they need to do, and some at the beginning they just go to the choir class because they need it, because it's mandatory. But after, my goal is is to feel that they are there, and they like to be there anyway. And of course we need to achieve that in different ways, and this was one of them, but the other ones that you mentioned were very important to not always have this idea of formal thing, but have a different kind of approach.
You know, we often talk about the United States choral tradition as being one of the strongest. Guess how many boys sing in high school choirs in the United States? New research came out last week. 4%. 4% of high school boys are singing in choirs. What about the other 96?
Oh, precisely.
Now the 4%, what they're getting is probably wonderfully matched for them.
Yeah.
The problem is everyone else. And I think that's our problem. Are we choral conductors, or are we music educators who teach music in group settings and perform in choirs? And that word performance is also an issue, because many of the boys who withdraw from singing withdraw because of the public performance. At the moment their voices are changing and they're the most vulnerable, we say you must get on stage in a uniform with lights in front of your friends and family and sing. And most of the boys say, could we else have other kinds of experiences that are choral singing but don't involve public performance until the boys say, okay, I want to share this. That's an issue.
Slightly shocked about the 4%.
4%.
So low, but should really say
4%.
Well, probably in Portugal it's less than that because they don't sing in high school at all.
I know Cindy Bell's research showed that it was based in the States, but 2/3 of choral singers are women.
Yeah.
But I didn't realise it was...
This research actually shows it's slightly higher than that. It's in the 70% range.
Not really surprised,
For high
but
school.
I'm very shocked at the 4%.
On the other hand, we have a large percentage, relatively, of adults who sing in choirs in the United States. So it's not so much a school issue. It's about singing, having the capacity to sing through the lifespan. But if you get the image that you can't do it at some point, you may never do it again.
It all ties into the research as well on musical identities and the importance of constructing a positive and flexible musical identity when someone is still in their childhood and adolescence, that through their lives they can have an active participation with music. So I'm afraid that's all we have time for this afternoon. Thank you both so much for participating. It's been a pleasure. We'd also like to thank the US Embassy in Lisbon for their support. The next Tiny Talk will happen in the next week. Please stay tuned to our social media networks to attend in the next talk. And thank you very much for watching.